Hello, this is Sharon Sarago. Today we're going to be working with commas, and specifically we'll use commas with dates, addresses, and series. Now this lesson is going to go fairly quickly, and if you're fairly confident with commas, then you can stay with me through the whole presentation, or if you'd like to pause after we talk about each one of these segments and do your exercises, then you can do that also. So the first thing that we're going to start covering is dates and how we use commas with those. The rule is that we use commas to separate the parts of a date. So we have here three different parts: the day of the week, the day of the month, and the year. And we want to separate those from each other. That accounts for the comma after Sunday and the comma after January 13, because we're separating all three parts. However, we have another rule that says if the sentence continues, you always want to put a comma after the year also. In this sentence, the sentence does not continue after the 1985, and so of course there's not a comma right before the period, although I have seen some students try to do that. Here the sentence continues, so we have two parts. We have the comma after September the 15th to separate the date from the year, and because the sentence continues, we put a comma after the year. Alright, so then we have another situation. If we have just the month and the year, then the rule is a little vague. It says that we don't have to put that comma between the month and the year if we don't want to, but it is not incorrect if we should decide to do it. If we had put a date with the month, like May the 5th, we are obligated to have that comma. But if we simply put the month and the year, then there is no comma needed, but again, it's not unlikely for you to put it there if you like to put it there. So we're first of all going to practice using commas with dates, and you'll see the sentences here, and you're simply going to place the commas where they belong, and of course you should have already downloaded your printed material so that you can do that on those sheets. Now you can pause here, or you can continue on with me and then come back and do your three exercises all at one time. The next issue is commas with addresses. It's going to be very similar to the dates. We use commas to separate the items in an address. And we're going to put a comma after the state, just like we did after the year, as long as it's not followed by the zip code. Here's an example. He lives at 2331 Meadow Lane. That's the home address, the house address. Farmersville is the city. And then Texas, but we do not separate that from the zip code because that's still part of Texas. I also sometimes see students try to put a comma after the number of the house address, 2331, comma, Meadow Lane. That will not work. Just remember that you're separating parts. So your house address is to be separated from your city. But of course you're not going to separate the number of the house. Just the house address from the city, from the state. Here's another example. We went to 34 Long Street, Dallas, Texas, and see how the sentence continues? So we must put a comma after Texas also, as long as there's no zip code. And then if there is a zip code, then we would separate the parts from each other, and then we would also put a comma after Texas in the zip code before we continue on with the sentence. Now we can practice that. Here are some sentences for you, and all of these sentences are going to deal with using commas with addresses. Just remember you're separating the parts from each other, and you will always put a comma after the state if it continues, but you can never separate the state from the zip code because they're basically the same. And our third thing is commas with a series. Now our series can come in different ways. They can be words, phrases, or clauses. So this first example is going to be a series of words. My favorite colors are red, white, and blue. We just have simple adjectives there, but notice that they all have to be the same kind of thing. They all have to be adjectives. You couldn't have an adjective for one, a noun for another, and adverb for another. Here's another example. We went to the store, to the movie, and to the ball game. These are phrases, but notice that they all are prepositional phrases. You could not have a couple of prepositional phrases and then throw in an infinitive phrase. They all have to be the same if it's a series. Here we're going to have all clauses. I am wondering how he will fix the hose, how he will mow the lawn, and how he will prepare the food. Notice that aside from all being clauses, they also start with that same word, how. On the SAT, this is important. In the issue of parallelism, which we will take up very soon, you'll find that when we have a series, a list of things, if you can begin with the same word, it makes a better sentence. Now, if the word and is used throughout the series, then we can omit the commas because the word and actually replaces the commas. I could have said, my favorite colors are red and white and blue. I don't have to put the commas in there like I did up above and say my colors are red, white, and blue. But you cannot use both. So you're either going to separate these items with commas or you're going to separate them with and, but you cannot use a combination. Here's that sentence up at the top again. We went to the store and to the movie and to the ball game, using the word and to join your series rather than those commas. Now there is always the question about where to put the comma before or after that last and. Newspapers usually omit that final comma before the and, but usually in other writing common practice is that we include it. I would prefer that you go ahead and put the comma before that last and that way you won't get confused. It won't ever be wrong to put it in. So you can make it easy on yourself and say, I'm always going to put it in. So what I want to do is come back up here. You see where my cursor is? My favorite colors are red, white, and blue. In the newspapers, you'll find that they'll say red, comma, white, then they leave this comma out. But it is not wrong to put it in. It's easier for you to remember that you are separating these items from each other, and therefore you would put a comma between them all. And this and is a matter of convention that we put it in before the last one. Just go ahead and put that comma right there in front of that and. You will not be wrong. Alright, then we have another issue. There may be a time that a sentence can become extremely confusing and your placement of commas will be the only thing to clarify it. Let's look at one. My granddad liked to eat carrots, squash, rice, and beans. Well, if it was a newspaper writing this, we wouldn't know if they left this out because that's the way they do things, or is this supposed to be rice and beans as one dish? Was it really rice on one side of the plate and beans on the other side? You see the confusion? Because rice and beans is very often served together. So, we could say, my granddad liked to eat carrots, squash, with the comma, and rice and beans. Now I know for sure that the rice and beans, because it's separated from the other items, I know that the rice and beans is actually one dish. And there's still one more aspect of commas with series that we have to know about, and this one involves the use of adjectives. The rule says that the comma is omitted before an adjective that is thought of as part of a noun. So we have this sentence. She has a large, beautiful dining room. But dining room is considered one thing. Now, one way that you can decide what to do is to put the word "and" between those words. So we wouldn't say it's a beautiful and dining room. We might say it's large and beautiful. It's a large and beautiful room. But we can't say it's a beautiful and dining room, because dining room is considered to be one thing. So just putting that word "and" there will help you to figure out, well, where am I really going to put those commas? She has a large and beautiful and dining room just does not sound right. Should be she has a large and beautiful dining room. Just be sure that you don't try to put both the comma and the "and" together. Use one or the other. All right, we're going to practice now using series. And again, you're simply going to place the commas where they're needed. You have your printed materials in front of you, so you can do that in just a moment. We're actually pretty close to the end here, so let's just go on. We have our test-taking practice. On this one, you're going to look at the sentence and simply decide whether it's punctuated correctly or not. Now, what I'm trying to do here is to get you prepared to proofread, because learning this information is not so difficult. The proofreading is the hard part, is to see it. These little commas can escape you. You have to look for them. And then, of course, we have our passage-based testing always for those students that are preparing for the new PSAT in October. And, of course, the SAT will move over to this format in either March or April. Then we have our answers. You know that the answers are always at the back of your printed material also. And again, I'd like to mention that you've got a vocabulary study that I would really like for you to take care of. Do that vocabulary study before you actually start that passage-based test, because there's some very difficult words there. So go over this over and over again so that you understand where these commas are. This is another thing that I'm thinking doesn't get a lot of attention in the regular classroom. If you want to ask me a question, my email address is down below, and I'll be happy to respond to you. But otherwise, just mark the things you want to talk about, and when we see each other on our webinar, then you can ask me a question about that, and I'll go over it and over it and over it until we get it straight, okay? See you later.